Can you marry a man with just a 2-inch penis? It's a question most wouldn't even consider, but for Rachel Carter, the answer wasn't one she had the chance to give, until it was too late. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Luke 8 verse 17, the Bible speaks of hidden truths being revealed, but what happens when a man who preaches those very words becomes desperate to keep his own secret buried? What happens when that secret turns deadly? The morning after Rachel Carter said, "I do," hotel staff unlocked the bridal suite door expecting a room filled with love and laughter. Instead, they found silence, and her lifeless body, still in her wedding dress. Her husband, Aaron Mitchell, the preacher she trusted and loved, was gone. Aaron was a man of the cloth, admired by his congregation, a man who preached virtue and truth. But what Rachel discovered on their wedding night turned her joy into betrayal, and Aaron's desperation into something unspeakable. How far would someone go to hide the truth? Was it shame? Fear? Or was it the unraveling of a man who had built his life on lies? This is a story of love turned to loss, trust broken beyond repair, and the unthinkable consequences that followed. The details will surprise you. The choices will test your understanding of loyalty and betrayal. And the ending, well, the ending is something you will not forget. But before we get there, let's go back to where it all began. Because every betrayal has its roots, and every truth, no matter how buried, comes to light. 24 hours. That's all it took for a story of love, trust, and faith to unravel into something unthinkable. 24 hours after she said, "I do," Rachel Carter was dead, and the man she called her husband was on the run. Rachel Carter, 27 years old, was a woman who spent her life caring for others. A nurse by profession, she worked tirelessly to make her patients feel seen, heard, and comforted. Whether it was holding the hand of an elderly patient or smiling at a frightened child, Rachel had a gift for making people feel safe. To her friends, she was the kind of woman who gave more than she received, and to her family, she was their heart, a loving daughter, a devoted sister, and a person they thought would one day become an incredible wife and mother. Rachel grew up in a small Midwest town, the daughter of a working-class family who instilled in her two things, compassion and faith. Church on Sundays wasn't just routine, it was a foundation. Rachel's parents taught her that love was patient and kind, that trust was sacred, and that faith could guide her through anything life put in her path. Those lessons stayed with her as she moved into adulthood, working double shifts at the hospital to pay her bills and finding joy in the simple things, family dinners, quiet nights with friends, and dreams of one day building her own family. But Rachel's kindness was also her vulnerability. A long-term relationship in her early 20s had ended in heartbreak, leaving her questioning her worth and her ability to trust again. Friends recall how she spent years burying herself in work, pouring her energy into others so she wouldn't have to focus on the ache inside her. She told herself she would wait. Wait for someone who shared her values, her dreams, and most of all, her faith. And then, one Sunday morning, she met Aaron Mitchell. Aaron was everything Rachel thought she needed. Charismatic, thoughtful, and devout, he spoke with the kind of conviction that made people stop and listen. As a pastor, Aaron was a man of influence, a leader in his rural community who lived by the very teachings he delivered every Sunday morning. Or so it seemed. Aaron Mitchell, 35 years old, had a reputation that stretched far beyond the four walls of his small-town church. To his congregation, he was a man of unwavering principles, a preacher who spoke of morality, purity, and discipline. Women admired him. Men respected him. Parents brought their children to hear his sermons, trusting him to set an example of what it meant to walk the righteous path. But the Aaron Mitchell they saw was not the Aaron Mitchell he truly was. Beneath the polished words and carefully crafted image was a man consumed by shame. Aaron carried a secret, one that had haunted him since his youth. He was deeply insecure about his body, a fact that had caused him ridicule as a young man and humiliation he never recovered from. It shaped him. It twisted the way he saw himself and the world around him. And over time, that shame became an obsession to hide the truth at all costs. Aaron had learned early that power gave him control. In the pulpit, he wasn't weak. In the pulpit, people didn't see his flaws, they only saw his words. He built his reputation on the idea of purity, preaching abstinence and condemning intimacy before marriage. To his congregation, this was a sign of discipline and devotion. To Aaron, it was a way to keep people at arm's length. No intimacy meant no exposure. No exposure meant no shame. When Aaron met Rachel, he saw more than a woman of faith, he saw an opportunity. Rachel's kindness, her belief in his words, and her longing for a future rooted in love made her the perfect target. Aaron courted her carefully, playing the role of the perfect partner. He insisted on no intimacy, framing it as a sign of his commitment to God's teachings. Rachel admired him for it, believing she had finally found a man who lived by his convictions. Her family remembers how Rachel glowed when she talked about Aaron. She described him as kind, respectful, and steady, the kind of man she'd been praying for. Aaron promised her a life of love, security, and faith. And Rachel believed him. But what Rachel didn't know was that Aaron's abstinence had nothing to do with faith. It was a lie, a calculated plan to keep her from seeing the truth until it was too late. Aaron believed that once they were married, Rachel would have no choice but to accept him as he was. To him, marriage was a trap that would keep her silent. But Aaron underestimated Rachel's strength, and on the night of their wedding, everything came undone. This is the story of a man who built his life on lies, of a woman who trusted too deeply, and of the devastating collision between love and betrayal. What began as hope turned to loss. What began as trust turned to broken promises. And what followed, would change everything. Do you believe in abstinence before marriage? Do you think it's a sign of faith, discipline, or something deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because for Rachel Carter, it was a choice she made out of trust in a man who claimed to be a reflection of God's will. But what if that trust was misplaced? What if abstinence wasn't about faith, but about hiding the truth? Rachel met Aaron Mitchell on a Sunday morning. She was sitting near the back of the church, her hands folded in prayer, asking for answers to a life that had started to feel too heavy. Work had been draining, and loneliness was something she had tried for years to bury. For Rachel, faith was her foundation, and church was where she went to find comfort. That day, she wasn't expecting to meet anyone new, let alone the man who would change her life forever. Aaron Mitchell wasn't easy to ignore. Standing tall at the pulpit, his words commanded attention. He spoke with authority, with certainty, qualities that made his sermons powerful and his presence magnetic. After the service, Aaron approached Rachel. It was simple at first, a kind word, a conversation about faith and life struggles. Rachel was caught off guard by how easy he was to talk to. There was something calming about Aaron's voice, something reassuring about the way he listened. That first meeting turned into more conversations, more Sunday mornings where Rachel found herself staying longer after service. Aaron was unlike anyone she'd met. He wasn't just a preacher, he was a man who seemed to understand her. He listened to her fears, her dreams, and the weight she carried from a relationship that had left her broken. Aaron told her God had a plan, that her struggles were leading her to something better. And in time, Rachel began to believe that Aaron might be part of that plan. Their courtship moved slowly. Aaron was deliberate, never crossing boundaries, always framing his intentions around faith. Early on, Aaron made his position clear, there would be no intimacy before marriage. He said it wasn't just a choice, it was a conviction, a reflection of the values he preached every Sunday. To Rachel, this was admirable. Here was a man who lived what he taught. A man who believed love was more than physical, it was spiritual, it was holy. But as weeks turned into months, Rachel found herself struggling. She wanted to be close to Aaron, to hold his hand longer, to lean into him in moments of silence. She confided in friends about how hard it was to wait, but she always ended those conversations with the same words: "It's worth it. He's worth it." Rachel respected Aaron's convictions. She believed his restraint was a sign of his integrity, proof that he was a man she could trust. Looking back, there were moments, small moments, that should have raised questions. Times when Aaron would stiffen at an innocent touch. Times when he seemed to avoid conversations about their future as husband and wife. Rachel noticed these things, but she dismissed them. She told herself Aaron was nervous, that he wanted their marriage to start on the right foundation. After all, he was a preacher. He had a reputation to uphold. Aaron knew exactly what he was doing. Every choice, every word, was calculated. By framing his avoidance as faith-driven, he ensured Rachel would never question it. To Rachel, his abstinence made him a man of strength. To Aaron, it was a shield, one that protected him from exposure. Friends would later say Rachel was happier than they'd seen her in years. She spoke about Aaron with pride, about how lucky she was to have found a man of such conviction. Aaron, too, played his role well. He would take her hand and pray with her, look her in the eyes and tell her God had brought them together. And Rachel believed him. She believed in the life they were building, in the love they were promising each other. But what Rachel didn't know was that Aaron's love wasn't love at all. It was a lie built on fear, a lie that would unravel the moment the truth came to light. Did Rachel ever have doubts? Maybe. But love has a way of silencing the questions we don't want answers to. And Rachel wanted so badly to believe that Aaron was everything he claimed to be. So, she ignored the red flags, dismissed the unease, and convinced herself that waiting for marriage was the right thing to do. She didn't know that the man she loved, the man she trusted with her future, was hiding something he'd spent his entire life running from. And when the truth finally came out, the love she thought she had, turned to something else entirely. Let me ask you, would you stay with a man who lied to you? A man who built your entire relationship on deceit, knowing you would have walked away if you'd known the truth? Could you forgive him, or would you leave, no matter the cost? For Rachel Carter, the answer was clear. But what she didn't know was how far her husband would go to keep her silent. The day of the wedding was picture perfect, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. The church was decorated with white roses, the congregation filled the pews, and the organ hummed softly as Rachel walked down the aisle. She was glowing, her smile radiant, her step steady. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the day she would finally start the life she dreamed of. Her friends whispered about how beautiful she looked. Her family wiped tears of joy from their eyes. But Aaron Mitchell stood at the altar looking like a man carrying a weight no one could see. To the guests, it was nerves, a preacher overwhelmed by the significance of the vows he was about to take. But to Aaron, it was something much darker. Every moment brought him closer to the truth being revealed, and every word he said felt like another stone added to the pile of lies he had built. The ceremony itself was flawless. The vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto trembling fingers. Rachel believed every word Aaron spoke: "I promise to honor you, to love you, to cherish you, and to always tell you the truth." To her, this was love in its purest form. To Aaron, it was the final curtain call before his carefully constructed facade began to crumble. By the time they left the church, Rachel was on cloud nine. She held Aaron's hand tightly, smiling at the flashes of cameras and the cheers of their friends. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and prayers for their future together. But those closest to Aaron noticed something strange. He was distant, distracted, smiling when he had to but never really present. People chalked it up to exhaustion. No one could have guessed the truth. Rachel couldn't wait for the night to come. This was the moment she had waited for, prayed for. The moment she would finally share herself with the man she loved. For years, Aaron's insistence on no intimacy had been difficult, but now she saw it as a beautiful sign of his commitment to her. She told her friends how lucky she was to have a man who respected her so deeply. But the wedding night wasn't what Rachel imagined. As they entered the hotel suite, Rachel's excitement was palpable. She looked at Aaron, eager and full of hope, unaware of the storm that was about to come. Aaron's hands trembled as he fumbled with his tie. His voice was unsteady when he said, "I'll just freshen up." Rachel laughed, teasing him for being so shy. But Aaron wasn't shy, he was terrified. As the minutes stretched on, Rachel's playful patience began to fade. "Aaron, are you all right?" she asked. Finally, he stepped out of the bathroom, his face pale, his movements stiff. Rachel approached him, her smile softening as she whispered, "It's just us now. You don't have to be nervous." But when the truth was revealed, Rachel's smile disappeared. In an instant, everything she believed about Aaron shattered. The man who stood before her was not the man she thought she married. The silence between them was suffocating until Rachel's voice broke it, sharp and trembling. "So this is why you avoided me?" Aaron didn't deny it. He didn't try to comfort her. His voice was cold and flat when he finally spoke, "No woman would accept me otherwise." Rachel's shock turned to anger. "You lied to me," she said, her voice rising. "You tricked me into this. You made me believe you were a man of honor, but this is a sham." "Raina, you're not thinking clearly," Aaron said, his voice trembling as he stepped closer. "You can't just throw away our marriage like this. We took vows before God. You lied to me, Aaron. This whole marriage was built on a lie," she exclaimed, her voice shaking with both anger and heartbreak. Aaron, desperate to defend himself, responded, "You have to understand, no one would accept me otherwise. Now that we're married, you have to stay. It's what the Bible teaches." Rachel shook her head, struggling to process what she had just uncovered. "So, this is it. This is the reason you were so against intimacy all this time. To deceive me. Knowing I would have never continued this relationship if I knew. Knowing I wouldn't have married you." Her voice quivered as she continued, her words cutting to the core of his deception. "Your penis, Aaron. It's so small and tiny. You knew this, and instead of being honest, you chose to trap me in a lie. You manipulated me with faith to cover your selfishness. Marriage is about trust, Aaron, and you've given me none of that. This isn't just a betrayal, it's a scam. You've used everything you preach to deceive me, and I won't be a part of it." Aaron's composure cracked. Desperation flooded his words. "This is unbiblical, Rachel. You can't leave me now. Marriage is for life. We made vows before God." But Rachel wasn't listening. She was done. The hurt in her voice was clear when she said, "This isn't marriage. This is deception. You used me, Aaron. You're worse than everything you preached against." Aaron begged, his words becoming frantic. "I love you, Rachel. We can make this work. You just need to understand," but Rachel cut him off. "Understand? I'll never understand this, and I will never stay in this. You don't deserve me, and I won't let another woman fall for your lies." Those words hit Aaron like a blade. His breathing grew heavy. "You can't do that," he said, his voice low. Rachel stood tall, her face set with resolve. "Watch me." This was the night Rachel Carter's life was stolen from her. A night that began with hope and ended with a betrayal so devastating it would leave an entire community reeling. What started as a promise of forever turned into something no one could have imagined in just 24 hours. Rachel's resolve to leave was her final act of strength, but for Aaron, it was the one thing he couldn't allow. "How do you intend to satisfy me with this little tiny penis? Do you want me to cheat on you?" Rachel's words cut through the silence like a blade. "It is against my faith to cheat, but you can't satisfy me with your tiny penis. I will divorce you, Aaron. This marriage is a lie." Aaron's face turned red, his breathing sharp and uneven. Shame, anger, and fear swirled together like a storm inside him. "Did I create myself?" he shouted, his voice trembling with desperation. "If I had a choice, I wouldn't have gone for a tiny penis. I wouldn't have chosen this." Rachel didn't back down. "Then why did you deceive me, Aaron? You trapped me in this lie knowing I would never have married you if I knew. You stole my future. You used your faith to manipulate me. I will not stay with you." Aaron's world began to collapse. The walls he had spent years building, walls of lies, control, and carefully curated respect, were crumbling in front of him. And Rachel, the woman he thought would stay silent, was walking away. Her words echoed in his mind: divorce. Deception. Betrayal. He couldn't let that happen. Rachel picked up her bag and turned toward the door. Her steps were slow but deliberate, her body trembling with anger and heartbreak. Aaron stood frozen, his hands curled into fists at his sides, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't let her leave. If she left, everything would unravel. His congregation would know. Everyone would see him for who he truly was. In that moment, it wasn't just shame that consumed him, it was fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of losing everything. "You can't ruin me." Aaron's voice exploded as he lunged forward. Before Rachel could react, his hands gripped her arm. "Let go of me, Aaron," she screamed, trying to pull away. But Aaron wasn't listening. His grip tightened, and the room filled with the sound of their struggle. Rachel pushed back, clawing at his hands, her voice breaking as she cried out, "You're hurting me." The struggle was chaos. The hotel room, once meant to be a place of love and new beginnings, became a scene of desperation. Aaron's hands shook as he pushed her back, yelling words he could barely understand himself. "You can't do this to me." Aaron yelled, his grip tightening. "You can't bring disgrace to me. You can't embarrass me. I thought you would understand." Rachel's voice rose, sharp with defiance. "You deceived me, Aaron. You lied." She tried to twist away, stumbling as Aaron's hold on her refused to loosen. Desperation cracked through his voice as he shouted, "You can't leave me. You can't expose me." As Rachel raised her voice to shout for help, Aaron's desperation spiraled. "You can't bring disgrace to me. You can't embarrass me," he yelled. His hand struck her cheek, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. Rachel staggered back, her hand pressed to her face, her breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. "I thought you would understand." Aaron's voice broke as the chaos seemed to freeze for a moment, but Rachel's resolve didn't falter. She moved toward the door again, shaking as tears ran down her face. "I will not stay in this, Aaron. I will not let you trap me." Aaron couldn't hear her anymore. His vision blurred, his body trembling with anger and fear. As Rachel turned her back to him, reaching for the door, he snapped. In one sudden, violent motion, he grabbed her again. The struggle resumed, more frantic, more chaotic. Rachel's voice, broken with desperation, pleaded for him to stop. But Aaron wasn't stopping. He couldn't. "You can't ruin me," he screamed as his hand struck out in blind rage. The moment Rachel stumbled, everything changed. Her head struck the corner of the nightstand, the sound echoing in the silent room. Aaron froze. Rachel's body went still, her eyes wide with shock as she collapsed to the floor. The room, which seconds before had been filled with shouts and chaos, fell into an eerie silence. Aaron stood over her, breathing heavily, his hands shaking. "Rachel," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Rachel, get up." But she didn't move. Panic began to seep in as the reality of what had just happened hit him. His chest heaved, his mind racing. "What have I done?" he muttered to himself. "Oh God, what have I done?" For a long moment, Aaron didn't move. He stared at Rachel's lifeless body, her wedding dress now wrinkled and stained, a haunting reminder of what this night was supposed to be. And then the fear returned. It wrapped around him like a vice, squeezing tighter with each second that passed. Aaron knew he couldn't stay. He knew what would happen if anyone found out. Aaron grabbed his belongings in a rush, his movements frantic and clumsy. His hands fumbled as he zipped up his bag, his mind screaming at him to leave. He didn't look back as he opened the door. Didn't look at Rachel, lying there, still in her wedding dress. He slipped out of the room and into the hallway, his footsteps hurried and uneven. But the hotel's CCTV cameras caught it all. The door opening. Aaron stepping out. The way he looked around, panicked, before disappearing down the hallway. Outside, the night was quiet. Aaron fled into the darkness, carrying with him the weight of his crime. The man who had stood at the altar just hours before, promising love and truth, was now a man on the run. Rachel Carter's life had been taken in a moment of desperation fueled by lies, shame, and the fear of being exposed. And Aaron Mitchell, the preacher who had once preached virtue and faith, had become the very thing he spent his life condemning. But Aaron's escape wouldn't last long. Because the truth, no matter how buried, always comes to light. The next morning, the hotel's housekeeper knocked on the door of the bridal suite. There was no answer. After several tries, she entered, and what she saw made her scream. Rachel Carter lay motionless on the floor, her wedding dress still clinging to her body. The room was silent, the air heavy. Rachel was gone. The police arrived quickly, sealing off the scene as they collected evidence. Rachel's belongings were untouched, but something was missing, her husband. It didn't take long for suspicion to fall on Aaron Mitchell. The CCTV footage told part of the story. In the dead of night, Aaron had been captured leaving the hotel in a hurry, his head down, his movements erratic. To investigators, he looked like a man running from something. Detectives spoke with hotel staff and guests, piecing together the timeline. The couple had arrived just hours earlier, but Rachel was now dead, and Aaron was gone. The search for him began immediately. Over the next week, Aaron's escape stretched across state lines. Police tracked his movements using credit card transactions, gas station surveillance, and tips from the public. Every lead brought them closer, the walls closing in on him. Finally, after 7 days on the run, they found him. Aaron was arrested at a dingy motel just outside a neighboring city. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. The man who once stood in front of a congregation, preaching faith and truth, now sat in silence, his lies laid bare. Rachel's murder shocked everyone who knew her. The investigation revealed the full extent of Aaron's deceit, and the lengths he had gone to, all to protect a secret that would have been far easier to tell. At the station, Aaron Mitchell sat in the interrogation room, his hands cuffed, his head bowed. Hours passed before he spoke. When he did, his voice was shaky, his words spilling out like a dam had broken. "I couldn't let her destroy everything I built," he admitted, his eyes refusing to meet the detectives. "I just wanted her to understand. No one else ever understood." Under pressure, Aaron confessed. He spoke of the shame he had carried his whole life, his insecurities, the ridicule he'd faced as a young man, and how those wounds had shaped him. He explained how he had built his life around hiding the truth, believing his lies would protect him. But when Rachel discovered his secret, he saw his entire world crumbling. His desperation turned deadly. In the courtroom, the truth played out in front of Rachel's grieving family and friends. Her parents sat silently as Aaron's confession was played aloud, his words filling the room like a chilling echo. Friends described Rachel's kindness, her hope for a future, and how this betrayal stole not just her life but their dreams for her. There wasn't a dry eye when her mother spoke. Rachel trusted him. She believed in him. And he took everything from her. Aaron's congregation, once loyal and devoted, filled the seats behind him. Many looked down, unable to reconcile the man they had admired with the man now accused of such a horrific crime. Some wept. Others whispered prayers. The man they had called a preacher was now nothing more than a murderer. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict was unanimous, guilty of murder in the first degree. When the judge delivered the sentence, the room sat in heavy silence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Aaron's fate was sealed. The man who had spent his life hiding in shame would now spend the rest of it behind bars, with nothing left to hide. As Aaron was led out of the courtroom, shackles on his wrists and ankles, Rachel's family clung to each other. Justice had been served, but no sentence could bring Rachel back. In the end, the truth Aaron fought so hard to bury was the very thing that destroyed him. A preacher who built his life on lies would live out his days in a prison cell, remembered not for his sermons, but for the life he stole. In the aftermath, Rachel Carter's family was left shattered. Her parents grieved the daughter they raised to trust, love, and believe in others. She deserved so much more, her mother said through tears. She trusted him, and he destroyed her. Aaron Mitchell's legacy fell apart. His church disowned him, his congregation left grappling with betrayal. The man they once respected had used his faith as a mask to hide his darkest secret, and his lies came at the ultimate cost. How many lives are destroyed by lies and shame? How far would someone go to protect a truth they believe no one could accept? Aaron chose deception, manipulation, and violence, all to hide what he feared most. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Trust can be a gift, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon. And as Rachel's story reminds us, the truth will always come to light, sometimes at a devastating price. What would you have done in Rachel's position? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories that uncover the darkest truths.